next fabrication task, we are going to learn to make a spiral or a spring. These can be really powerful forms with a lot of tension in them, and they can make very interesting components for your Project 1 sculpture. For this particular fabrication project, you will need a pair of safety glasses. You want to guard your eyes on this one because we're going to have a long length of metal that's sort of bouncing around a little bit. You are also going to need to be near one of the vices in the studio. There are vices on a number of the tables. They look a little different, but they all work basically the same. In addition, you will need a hammer. I've chosen this mid-size ball peen hammer, but whatever feels comfortable weight-wise and feel to you will work just fine. I'm going to need a pair of vice grips. This is these plier-looking things with a screw on the end. You find these in the wood box that's currently located over by where the tape is that you use to label your artwork. And then finally, you're going to need a couple of pipes. These pipes live underneath the radio by the big garage door in the studio, and they come in various widths. This is probably the biggest one we have, and it's a good one to start with. We also have little tiny ones that I'll show you why I have this in a minute. So to fabricate a spiral or a spring, we are going to open up our vise so it's just a little bit wider than the pipe that we've chosen. And I'm going to go ahead and slide this pipe in so that it rests on the crossbar of the vise down here. Then I'm going to take a length of metal. For this, you want a fairly long length of metal. This is probably about 6-7 feet, but anything between 4 feet and up will work pretty well for you. The reason you want a long length is because this is actually going to take quite a bit of metal to do this, and if you have a short length, it's not going to be a very good spiral or a very good spring. I'm going to take this length of metal and I'm going to load it into the vise so it's lined up with my pipe and sitting basically right in front of it. I'm going to go ahead and put it down on the crossbeam just like I did with the pipe, and I'm going to hold them together like this and then close my vise. This is a technique. It's actually really helpful to have a friend hold this for you, but of course in the time of COVID it's a little more difficult to do that, so you just got to kind of balance the two. So you can see it's sitting right in front, pinched in between the pipe and the edge of the vise. Now these vices are old. Hand tightening them is not going to be enough to hold this in place. This is one of the reasons you want to have a hammer. So I'm actually going to wail on this until I'm really sure it's closed. These vices close clockwise, righty-tighty. Pretty sure that's closed. This feels pretty well in there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this length of metal that I have here and I'm going to bend it down so that it has a little right angle in it and it's parallel to the floor. Just like so. I'm going to do this slowly and carefully just to make sure that I'm not moving anything. I'm also going to be very aware of my surroundings. So we're lucky this semester that we have less people in the studio, but we need to be careful that we're not hitting anybody with this rope length of metal here. Once I've got it parallel to the floor, I'm going to take this and I'm going to wrap it up against the pipe. I'm trying to get it as close to the pipe as I can. I'm going to go reasonably slow here. I'm going to watch myself and everybody around me to make sure I'm not hitting them. And as I come around, I'm going to try to stack this neatly, one right on top of the other, so the coils are close together. You'll notice as you do this that some scale falls off the metal. Don't need to worry about that. That's just a little oxidation from sitting outside. Doesn't hurt anything. I shouldn't say it doesn't hurt anything because it does make your hands dirty. You can do this with your gloves on if you want to, but as I said in another video, I think I tend to like being able to feel what I'm doing, so I don't usually wear the gloves for this particular purpose. get close to the end here, it's going to get harder and harder to make this turn because there's not a lot of length left here. We can't really lever against it very well. So that is what this little pipe is for. As it gets to the point where it's just too hard for you to turn by hand, you can put this length of pipe on the end and give yourself a little extra. And you can get most of it wrapped on there. Once you've got your spring or your coil wrapped on here, you're going to tap the opposite direction with the hammer. So now I'm going clockwise until I can loosen it. And I can remove the pipe. Whoops. My coil slid right off of there. And I've got a nice tight spring. What's cool about this is you can keep it a pretty nice tight spring, or you can actually expand it way out. So to do that, you're going to close your vise most of the way. And you're going to take this end that was originally down in the vise sitting on the cross beam. You're going to place that in here so it's horizontal, just like that. Same thing, I'm going to hammer this really well closed. Vice grips come into play. Now these things, they're not the very most gently used tools. They've been hard used in the studio. Normally this tool has a spring in here to kind of hold this piece in place right here, but many of ours do not. So right here you see kind of a screw that's attached to this little knob right here. We want this piece to go right on top of that screw. So it's seated in there. Sometimes I have to kind of hold it in there with my hand as I adjust this. Then I'm going to take the jaws of this and I'm going to place them on my metal and I'm going to close them just like this. Some of these guys you actually have to manually open them up because again that spring isn't there. So you're going to get it on here and then I'm going to take this knob at the end and I'm going to tighten it righty-tighty or clockwise until it is as tight as it goes with the jaws closed. Once it's as tight as it goes, I'm going to push this little spoon-like piece right here, open this up, turn it another half turn or slow, reposition it, and then I'm going to squeeze really tight and you'll sort of feel it join together, and then these vice grips lock in place. That's the advantage of vice grips as opposed to a wrench, is that you can have it lock at a certain jaw width. Then at this point, I'm going to grab the vice grips and I'm going to pull this out. You need to be very careful that there's nobody and nothing that you're going to trip over or stumble back into behind you. So again, awareness of your surroundings is very important here. You want to make sure the vise is really closed, and then you're going to pull it out kind of like a tug of war, except instead of pulling in a big, muscle man sort of move with your arms, you're going to use your body weight and your mass to help pull this back. So I'm going to create a wide stance here, grab my vice grip, and I'm going to pull back, and you'll notice how I'm kind of pulsing to get this to open up. And I just pull it out. Oops, lost my vice grips on here. Again, not the very best of tools. I'm going to pull it out as far as I want it to be. So I could open it up more if I wanted to. Sometimes if you have one little area that's a little tighter, you can move your vice grips in here and pull just that spot out. When you're all done, you'll take the spoon part here, press that down. That'll allow you to open up the vice grips. Again, left loosen, counterclockwise, until you can open it by hand. And now we have this beautiful spring or this beautiful spiral. This is a really interesting form and something that can add a lot of visual interest and tension to your Project 1 sculpture. So I definitely recommend trying making one of these. I made it look potentially a little easier to stretch this out than you will find it, especially if you are a smaller person or don't have as much mass to put behind it, but I can always help you in that case. Just call me over.